Dr. Armin Serafian was president of La Verne College, University of La Verne from 1975 to 1985.
There's no question that he did a lot of positive things, other than just save the institution, which I rather important.
He would even plan surprise birthday parties for himself. The New Era banquet, and then he'd plan a surprise for himself.
Yes. But I never felt that he was comfortable here. He just didn't seem comfortable. He didn't seem comfortable when he was talking to the faculty or when he was talking to officials from other schools.
I was well aware, walking around the campus as a trustee, that it just didn't appear to be a very vibrant campus. Overgrown, ivy all over the place. The grass, where there was supposed to be grass, it was dead. Sprinkler systems were not working.
During the last 8 months of Dr. Serafian's presidency, La Verne also had a chancellor, Richard Landis.
In 1984, he was named to serve as the chancellor of the University of La Verne. Our chancellor was not content with just holding the university together and treading water during his 8 months. No, he moved ahead with master planning, with board committees, and with campus enhancement. He commuted for 8 months between his home in the Bay Area in Piedmont and Ontario. It's a tough burden, and it's a sacrifice.
Dick Landis just became chancellor. Armin had left the university. I flew up to San Francisco and took the time, also while I was there, to meet with Dick Landis at his country club. He said, I've checked, and he said, you have a record for being an outstanding executive businessman. He said, hardly anybody knows this, but the university is bankrupt. And he said, we can't borrow any money. We're so deep in debt. We really need somebody who really knows how to run a business.
Dick did fine, but he was an interim, and everybody knew it.
Welcome to an oral history of the University of La Verne, a documentary series prepared by the students and faculty of Honors 304-351 during the university's 125th anniversary year, 2016-2017. I'm Al Clark, one of the faculty in the honors course, and I created this episode focusing on the presidency of Stephen Morgan. I call this segment A Firm Foundation because Dr. Morgan put the institution on a solid financial footing for the first time in its history.
The kind of things we came across, we were spending $17,000 to $18,000 a month on the telephone, just on the telephone, $17,000 to $18,000. We were spending $36,000 a year on the Yellow Pages. I phoned every department about the Yellow Pages. I'll give you a good example. School of Continuing Education. They had Yellow Pages in all of the satellites, all over the place. San Diego. I said, have you ever enrolled a student that found a picture from the Yellow Pages? And we're not on the Yellow Pages, but you are. It must have been before our time. During this period, early period, I found out that when everybody got paid, there was an exodus to the banks because some checks would bounce. When I took over the VP, no checks bounced.
When I arrived at La Verne in 1985, within the first few weeks I had a meeting with the bank, and the bank said to me, we don't want to foreclose on a university, but if you can't assure us that you have plans to turn the institution around financially, we're going to have to take some action. Well, that got my attention very quickly.
And I was surprised when Steve Morgan took over the responsibility of the president. I admire him for that, because nothing was happening in Louisville. And, it's people were expecting the school to fall.
Yeah.
Yet he took the responsibility and accepted the position.
La Verne was really in trouble. And he hung in there. He had his own management style.
So we formed a task force we called it the Options Task Force. We brought people in from throughout the university, including faculty members and a couple of trustees. And I remember we met all summer, the first summer of my presidency. And our goal was to make changes in the operations that would generate a bottom line of $750,000 to bring us back into balance. We did that through a combination of cutting expenditures and bringing in some new revenue through growth of programs. And fortunately, that plan was implemented and it was successful. So within about a year after I arrived, we were able to bring the budget back into balance, and we were able to operate with a balanced budget the remainder of the time I was here.
And that's impressive, 26 years of balanced budgets, huh?
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
You know, we had a very good team, and we took it very seriously. We always said, we can't spend more than we bring in. We want to invest, we want to improve, but we can't spend more than we bring in. And we stuck to that, and it worked.
Yeah.
Contrary to what you might have read in the Los Angeles Times several weeks ago, we are not a tiny university awash with debt. First of all, we are not tiny. We have nearly 4,000 full-time equivalent students. Secondly, we are not awash with debt. We are rapidly putting our debt behind us. We are a university on the move, with plans to continue to strengthen our academic programs, our financial base, and improve our physical plant.
Steve and Ann came my senior year, so 85 to 86 was his first year, and it was sort of the first year that the campus had flowers.
Oh.
It was looking pretty ratty.
Yeah.
And so there was great hope when he came. I just remember, like, it's a young president and his young wife, and there was just a lot of hope and promise. I do remember that. And the campus, there's something about your perception, you know, like when you see beauty and something's being taken care of, then you think, somebody cares about this, it's important.
It's a personal priority of mine, but I've long had the belief that all of us, internal to the institution and external to the institution, get our first impression and our day after day impression by the appearance of our home, an organization, an institution such as La Verne. And when I came here, the campus did not look good. And I said, the first thing we want to do is wherever we have grass, we want to make it green. We need to fix sprinkler systems. I remember Founders Hall had not been painted for a long time and was pretty dingy. But we didn't have the money to paint it. And one day I was sitting in my office upstairs at lunchtime, and in came Mary Lefebvre. And she was huffing and puffing because she'd walked up the 3 flights of stairs, and she sat down in a chair in front of my desk, and she said, "Steve, I was on my way over to Pomona College." She had her undergraduate degree from Pomona. And she said, I was going to make a gift of $300,000. But I got to thinking, it won't really make a difference to them, but it would to you.
Wow.
Well, I nearly jumped out of my chair into her lap to give her a hug to say, you don't know, but you just primed the pump to get us moving to fix up this campus and make it look like a real institution. And we used that money to do some painting in Founders and get things started. So that's how we got started on improving the campus. And my wife Ann played a major role as an unpaid employee of the university
Interior
to prime
decorating.
that. And Sharon Wright at that time also played a major role. They had a committee called the Facilities and Beautification Committee, and I think maybe Sharon chaired that committee and Ann co-chaired it with her. And their trademark was a box of Fab soap. There was a detergent called Fab in those days.
Yes,
so they were Facilities and Beautification, and they put that box of soap in the middle of the table when they had a meeting. And they said, we're going to clean this place up.
Color photographs of our city from the past. This one was taken on October 10th, of this year. It's the most up-to-date photograph available, and I think if you look very closely, you can even see the additional greenery around the University of La Verne.
Skip and I had been in the EDD program together.
Oh,
we were
I
both
see.
in the same cluster and earned our EDDs at the same time. Skip was a math teacher, basically, in the public schools, and then he came to La Verne to teach teachers. And so he was head of the teacher education program. And I remember when we had a vacancy for the finance person, I went to the Board of Trustees and I said, I'd like to put Skip Monero in that position. And they looked surprised, and they just weren't sure that a faculty member who'd never had experience with financial management could do the job. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. Let's try it for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, if you don't think Skip is doing an appropriate job, then we'll make a change. And certainly he proved himself to be very effective as a financial manager. Skip was a genius with numbers, and he could look at numbers and tell us where the revenue was coming from, which was the best revenue, where we should be spending our money, and he helped put us on the track to financial stability.
Steve Morgan was very helpful, I think, in getting the institution on the correct path, and I can imagine. I had 22 sports to deal with. He had I don't know how many departments and faculty members to deal with, but and no money to run that show also. So I think he probably did a magnificent job during that period of time. And for some reason, all of a sudden, things seem to be operating well, and we seem to have money enough to do some of the things we would have hoped that we could have done in the past.
Biff basically created the modern university relations.
He did. He really grew the university relations program. He added new dimensions to it and set us up as a professional fundraising organization, and then went off to become president of Friends University himself.
Mildred Davis, who served as alumni director under President Armin Sarafian, here provides a glimpse of university relations before Dr. Biff Green transformed them.
One day, Mary Ann Williams' husband, she was the alumni director, and he had another spot in the college. He came to our door once and he says, Millie, would you like to work at the college? We need somebody in the alumni office. First of all, you'd probably be filing. You know a lot of people in La Verne, and there's a lot of mail that come in, and we don't know where to send it. I said, oh yeah, I think I could do that. So I went down and got my feet wet in the alumni office at Woody Hall. So then when this gal, who was the alumni director, did not want to do it anymore, so she and the secretary coaxed me into it. Millie, you would be good at that. And I thought, alumni director? Hey, wait a minute. But I said, okay. They were all for it. And the staff there, Harold Fosnot was in the office at that time. I said yes. And I found out that Armin Sarafian at that time was president. And he told me that I could be the alumni director, but because of funds of the college, I would only get coordinator's pay.
My freshman year was the first year of President Morgan's tenure as president. Looking back at it now, that was interesting. At the time, it was like, oh, a new president, you really, okay, it's interesting. It was a different place. Clearly, La Verne had a lot of value, but they were still, we were living in San Dimas. They didn't have enough places on campus, so we had a mile and a half
The Woods, I think.
The Woods, right. And several of the buildings on campus were boarded up. And and the tents leaked a lot. But what it lacked in a physical presence, it made up for in its spiritual presence. And I think that's what drives students to stay throughout time is, quality of the faculty, the caring of the administration and the administrators and the staff. You can have the best buildings in the world, but if those things aren't right, they're not going to make it a university. So what made it a university were the people, and the other things were tangential at the time.
Diversity is an issue that certainly is going to continue to be important as we educate people to work in the world of the future. And that's an issue that I'm proud of the way we have addressed on this campus. We need to continue to address it. 30 years ago, we had diversity on this campus. More diversity than many schools did, and we always have.
The campus life was fine with me because I got a chance to really dig deeper in both the race and ethnicity classes, because that's a part of it, cultural diversity. I was amazed disappointed how few blacks took the class, and impressed with the number of whites and Hispanics and Asians who took the class, and it was outstanding. The work the kids did, they would immerse themselves into digging up information about some person in the past and bringing it alive in the class.
We started a thing here called the Brothers Forum. A woman named Harville Lewis, the year I stopped coaching, in 86 I guess it was, she said to me, she said, "So you're not going to coach anymore?" She said, "Well, I'm concerned," because she was the director of multicultural. She said, "I'm concerned about the percentage of African American male students that are graduating. They come and they play football and whatever else, and then they don't graduate." Her husband, Robert Lewis, she said, "You and Robert should figure something out." So I said, "Okay." So Robert and I talked about it. And we said, and it wasn't so much a mentoring thing, it was just really an advisement thing. So many of our kids that look like me, even as well-meaning as their parents may be, they don't understand accessing the game. And I'm talking about life and professional careers and stuff and what you have to do to do that. Our primary focus was the matriculation of African American males. I want these guys to graduate. But that's not saying that you can't come to the meetings and be a part of the organization if you're not African American. But just understand that's what I'm about. That's what we're trying to do. If you can buy in and that's what we do, then you're welcome to be a part of it. And in fact, when we first started, I think I had like 3 or 4 Latino guys, because they had nothing. We were the precursor. In fact, one of my guys who was part of the Brothers Forum, a Latino brother out of Chino, actually started next year. After about 9 years, I stopped doing it. And then Richard Rose came in and kept it going.
I've been involved in a loosely formed group, the Chicano Latino Staff Faculty Association. So it's actually started a number of years ago, I'm going to guess almost 20 years ago, by a few staff actually who Hispanic, and would get together for lunch and periodically would come up, how do we feel about our status here? We have all these Hispanic students, obviously first generation students in general, who maybe weren't getting the support they needed. And obviously sometimes staff are the most critical people, because if you're encountering a staff person in, let's just say, student accounts, you're going, look my mom and dad got this bill and didn't know what to do with it, and now it's overdue because they didn't tell me we had it, and and you're dealing with a staff person who says, well, some might say, well, I'm sorry, that's your fault. Mom and dad should know. It's like, I'm dealing with people who maybe don't speak English. And so they recognize maybe there's a little backstory. So they're going to say, well, tell me about this. And they might get that, oh, okay, well, we can work with this. And yes, there might be a penalty, there has to be, but maybe understanding that maybe mom and dad are seeing a letter written in English and going, we don't know what it is, and son isn't, or daughter isn't home for a couple of weeks, and now what do we do with it? So I think they were reflecting early on about, well, how do we better help the experience of our students, because obviously for a very long time we've had a significant number. And so this group's kind of formed as an effort to try to reach out to give mutual support.
One of the things that Rhoda started early in our history in terms of this interfaith work, even though we didn't call it, name it.
Right.
Rhoda started this annual Seder Passover meal.
Mm-hmm.
And that has gone on since, I believe, the 1970s,
mm-hmm.
and has continued to this day. And it is part of who we are, and it was always a faculty and staff and student experience.
It seems to me that 2 terms are very important. One is control. Under Steve's administration, we have gained control of these financial problems that bothered us for the previous 10 years. You mentioned earlier some of the things that Ann had done and was helping to do, but Steve also was very much involved in enhancing the campus, the landscaping of the campus, enhancing the interior buildings of this building, of Founders Hall. The fact that it's imminent, the beginning of the reconversion of Miller Hall, which has been sitting over there for 15 years without anybody using it because it was not earthquake proof. And we're going to start on that just almost any day now.
Miller Hall, and I've always been glad they didn't let us tear it down, actually, because I think it's a landmark on campus. I think campuses that can reflect their history and their architecture really can tell a story by the visual arts. So I was glad that we couldn't tear Miller Hall down, and it's been a very useful building to us, but it's also a campus icon. It's the oldest building we have on campus.
When Harold Fosnaught went out of office in 1968, one of the top priorities was a new dormitory. And since that time, we've heard new dormitory, new dormitory, new dormitory. Steve tells me it's imminent, that in the next week, a month or two, it's going to start. So he's gotten control of the finances, and he's enhancing the program.
Although La Verne changed its name to University in 1977, the four-college organization with separate deans, faculties, and facilities only developed slowly over the following decades. In the first year of the 21st century, however, the College of Law moved to Ontario, and a dean was appointed for the newly consolidated School of Education and Organizational Management.
The law school has grown beyond our wildest expectations and now makes a move to the city of Ontario and takes us to yet another location and is moving toward ABA approval. A marvelous opportunity for the institution in a number of ways to become a part of the Inland Empire, to become the first ABA approved school in the Inland Empire, to raise the entire institution's reputation to a new level. We're coming together with our School of Education and Organizational Leadership and really focusing some attention on programs that have been of great strength to this institution for a number of years, and bringing Leonard Pellissier from the University of South Carolina to serve as the charter dean of that new School of Education at a time when education is in the spotlight in the state of California.
Steve was very significant during his presidency of changing the morale, I think, of La Verne. I think Anne played a part of that too. She was really intent on getting the campus to look nicer, and Steve, I think, bought into that too, and it did. I think you walked across campus after Steve was president for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and you're kind of proud to walk across and it looked nice.
It did look nice.
And I think that played a part of the faculty morale. And I think Steve also, I have to give him a lot of credit, did whatever he could to increase the faculty salaries while he was here. And I think, again, that helps with faculty morale.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I think the first half of his presidency, and maybe a little beyond, he made some significant changes in La Verne that made it, I think, for lack of a better word, a classier school. It looked nicer. I think our attitudes were better. I think it was probably a good time. We had a little bit more money. We were getting a few more students, and since we were tuition driven, and that gave us a little bit bigger budgets. And so he certainly was significant in that. Again, I argued with Steve a lot, especially toward the latter part of his tenure, but I always considered him a friend and somebody I could go talk to.
The first 30 years of Dr. Morgan's administrative association with La Verne saw the institution change dramatically and witnessed several revolutions in technology.
1970, and we had 750 students at La Verne College 30 years ago. The operating budget has grown 30 times in that time. Our budget was less than $2 million. Next year it'll be $64 million. And what still stays in my mind, we had one copy machine. And it was a wet copier. You had 2 pieces. They went through this machine. They came out soaking wet. You peeled them apart, and voila, you had a copy. That was in the registrar's office, and no one else could use it. So if you were a faculty member here and you wanted to copy something, you were down in the ditto room. And you either had to type a mimeograph original and heaven help you if you made a mistake. If you made a mistake, you started over again. Or you typed a mimeo, and you went down there and you turned, we didn't have electric motors in those days. You turned the crank, and you had the copies for your class. We made far fewer copies. And does anyone have a clue how many copiers we have on this campus today? The last count, and I stopped counting a number of years ago, was we made more than 1 million copies per month in this institution. And computers. No computers when I started here. In fact, Virgil Wilkinson, who was the treasurer of the college, was just beginning to let people buy electric typewriters. But we had one computer terminal hidden down in a room in the basement of Founders Hall. And the only person I ever saw at that computer terminal was Ernie Eikenberry. I think he's the only one who knew how to use it. It was hooked by telephone line to a mega computer in Los Angeles that was vacuum tube and filled an entire room and took more air conditioning than we have for this entire campus. There was no internet. If we could ever get academic computing and administrative computing together, we could count the number of computers we have on this campus probably, and we would know. But the last time I looked, almost every full-time employee had a computer terminal on their desk, and we have far more computing power than that mega computer in Los Angeles ever dreamed of, and we pay about $1,200 per setup on the campus to do that.
But during Steve's time, things changed, improved a great deal.
I also believe that an institution such as La Verne helps level the playing field. In this tremendously diverse society, there is no more effective vehicle for leveling the playing field than higher education, than the education and the degrees that the people earn at the University of La Verne. We have 40,000 plus graduates around the world. Last time I looked in the alumni directory, they are in every state and 56 foreign countries. What an impact a little place like this has when you think of district superintendents, when you think of school teachers, when you think of workers throughout the corporate community. The impact we have as an institution, it's a snowball effect, and it's a big snowball that makes a big difference. It's a noble cause, an important, worthwhile mission. We can chart the course for the next century, so 50 years from now or 100 years from now, when people talk about what it was like in 2000, they will have said those people put another foundation block in the history of the university.
I would like to thank these people for assistance in creating the series An Oral History of the University of La Verne. I would like to thank the University Archives and Wilson Library for the use of these digital resources, as well as for the following interviews. Finally, I would like to acknowledge that many of the illustrations used in this documentary came from the works of Herbert Hogan, as well as from the Lambda yearbooks. Happy 125th anniversary, University of La Verne.